Good evening. We'd like to welcome you all to the July 1st monthly meeting of the Boston Civic Design Commission. The open meeting law requires that we notify the public that a recording of this meeting is being made by the commission's staff, and this meeting is now called to order. My name is Linda Eastley, co-chair of BCDC, and we wanted to give a warm thank you to the commissioners here tonight for their guidance that helps shape our city into a more beautiful, sustainable, and equitable city for all its citizens. Tonight, we don't have any new projects. That's really unusual for us, but we will be reviewing 3 projects for BCDC recommendation. And we also wanted to excuse Diana Fernandez, who's not able to be with us tonight. But we first wanted to give a big welcome to our 2 new commissioners, Jonathan Garland and David Nagahiro. Mimi and I had a chance to get better acquainted with both of them this morning, and we thought it would be fun to share a little bit about their backgrounds. So I get to introduce Jonathan, and Mimi is going to introduce David in just a second. So a little bit about Jonathan. He was born and raised here in Boston, which is really great. He'll have a good longitudinal opinion about how Boston is developing over time. He launched his practice, Garland Enterprises, or JGE, in 2018. And JGE actually has 2 arms, an architectural and design arm, and also a real estate development arm. So we're looking forward to having Jonathan's voice in both of those fields. And JGE has a really broad portfolio. They've done educational work, mixed use, life sciences, commercial, but they primarily focus on multifamily housing and with an emphasis in both affordability and historic contexts. So welcome, Jonathan. We're looking forward to hearing comments tonight and in future meetings. Mimi, do you want to introduce David?
Yes, I'm happy to introduce David Nagahiro. As many of you know, he's been in our design community for many years as the president of CBT, where he's been a vital part of the firm for nearly 40 years. He is the driving force behind the vision, the design ethos, and the continued advancement of the practice. He brings a remarkable depth and breadth to the knowledge of the city of Boston, really through the decades of leading transformative projects that we've had the opportunity to review on the commission. So we're delighted to have his insights, his voice, and his experience on the commission as we review future projects. In addition to his professional work, he has given a lot of time and he serves on several boards, Artists for Humanity, the editorial board of the Architecture Boston, and the Boston Preservation Alliance. One thing we learned today is that David is really dedicated to integrating past and present in the built environment, and is really focused on the aspects of context and how these new contributions to cities fit within a historic context. So we're deeply grateful for his ongoing commitment to the city of Boston and look forward to benefiting from his voice on the commission. Welcome,
Thank you.
David. We have
Thank
a
you so
third
much.
David too.
I know
So
we have a third David. We're going to have to keep all of that straight in our brains. But anyway, thank you both for joining us, and we're looking forward to hearing your perspectives over the years to come. We are going to shift now to the business portion of the meeting, and we're going to begin that with a roll call. Commissioners, if you could please say present as I call your name. Jonathan Garland,
Present.
Shauna Gilly-Smith,
Present.
Mick Young Kim,
Present.
Mimi Love,
present.
Anne Marie Lubenow,
Present.
David Manfredi,
Present.
David Nagahiro.
Present.
I think you said present, David. Is that right?
Present.
Yeah, okay. Laura Solano,
Present.
Kirk Sykes,
Are we back or we go back?
Keep doing my back.
Kirk, I see your window glowing
Present.
green, so
Sorry.
I'm assuming you're
Apologize.
present, and myself, Linda Eastley, present. Thank you. We have 2 meeting minute groupings to approve tonight. The approval of the June 3rd, 2025 monthly meeting minutes and the approval of the June 17th, 2025 Design Subcommittee Sessions A and B minutes. Is there a motion to approve these meeting minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Second.
Great. All of those in favor, please say aye. Jonathan Garland,
Aye.
Shauna Gilly-Smith,
Aye.
McYoung Kim,
Aye.
Mimi Love,
Aye.
Anne Marie Lubenow,
Aye.
David Manfredi,
Aye.
David Nagahiro,
Aye.
Laura Solano,
Aye.
Kirk Sykes,
Aye.
and myself, Linda Eastley, aye. The minutes are approved. So unusually, we don't have a report from review committee since we're not introducing any new projects. So we are going to zoom ahead and start presentations tonight with 776 Summer Street, Phase 2 in South Boston. Commissioners Love and Sykes are both recused, so we will invite you to turn off your cameras and audio, and we'll welcome you back for project number 2. This is the proponent's 7th presentation to us at BCDC, and the project was shared at our last monthly meeting on June 3rd, and the commissioners made a request that the proponents bring back a portion of the project, which is the Block E portion. So that's what we will be focusing on tonight, commissioners. And I invite the team to go ahead and share their presentation and begin.
Thanks, Linda. We're just going to have Tim Pernice share his screen.
Great.
Are you guys seeing the screen?
No.
Not yet.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. We got it. So I'll be brief here. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking time with us to go through recent design development relative to the Block E building at 776 Summer Street. I'll be brief so that the design team has time to walk you through our updates, but wanted to provide a quick overview of what the team will be sharing. At last month's meeting, we were very pleased to hear the commissioner's favorable remarks on consensus on our proposed drop-off relocation, the North Waterfront Plaza, our improvements on the south side of the 1898 building's integration of Block E, and the overall massing of the Block E building. While the team has reinserted these images in this presentation for reference, we'll plan to spend more time focusing on the Block E facade development, which now reflects progress responding to prior comments from the commissioners and inclusive of continued collaborative efforts with city staff. This design development will show responses to the comments made by the commissioners within the overarching themes provided previously of how this building's materiality and coloration should better respond to the surrounding context and how this building can better meet the ground and enhance the pedestrian experience. Now, before I steal any more of the team's thunder, I'll pass it along to SCB to walk you through the presentation. Devin?
Thank you very much, Kurt. This is Devin Patterson from SCB. I want to thank the commissioners for taking the time this evening to review this project. There's been a lot of thoughtful comments over the past few months, especially at the last June meeting, so looking forward to discussing that further. Next slide, please, Tim. As a refresher, we just wanted to kind of bring together a couple of slides that we had had in the last few meetings, really just kind of cover some things that were very successful and kind of orient any new commissioners to what's being talked about today. On the screen here is the 776 development. All the buildings surrounding us have been approved by BCDC, and we're here today to talk about the integration of Block E with 1898. We're in the center of the development there with the colored plans. Next slide, please. Also, at the previous meeting, we talked about the significant changes we made by moving the entrance to the hotel adjacent to the 1898 building here. That was based on some initial feedback that David Manfredi gave us to relocate it, integrating it better with Block E and the residential lobby, and aligning it with the sidewalk. In previous iterations, it was above the sidewalk, and that was not preferred. Next slide, please. Additionally, as we've developed the design of the entrance to 1898, we added new industrial glass openings to reveal the hidden histories of the historic turbine hall in Boston. A glass connection has also been added sort of as a buffer with hotels keys above a lobby, creating a transition between the solid building and the solid industrial building and a contemporary Block E building. It also establishes a visual connection to the waterfront through the building. The image here demonstrates how the flush condition between the sidewalk and hotel and residential entrances reinforces their visual connection to the pedestrian realm. Next slide, please. And before diving into the details of the refinements that we've made and are presenting today, let's address the feedback that we received at last meeting. We appreciate the positive comments from many of the commissioners at the meeting, especially about the integration of 1898 and the residential hotel building and the drop-off. Bill Ron, at his last BCDC meeting, said that the iteration presented improved the slenderness and verticality that he was looking to achieve from our team. We continue to incorporate feedback today. We have received during the course of the review and continuing this month with BPD. Today, we're focusing on 4 critical areas. Better integrate the new development with both existing neighborhood and existing future structures. We want to refine the materials to ensure the harmonious transition with the context. We want to evolve the balcony design to positively contribute to the overall aesthetic of the building and allow the building to interact with the ground level, especially for pedestrians on all sides. Next slide, please. This slide was used last month's meeting. This diagram identifies distinct character zones which have served as a roadmap for the 776 development. These zones include existing historic structures, areas requiring neighborhood compatible designs, transition zones, and waterfront areas. Further, the waterfront design reflects a vibrant, active neighborhood, emphasizing innovation while respecting its industrial heritage. Block E sits in the center of the development and is the only building attached to a historic structure. Our design and strategy pairs old with new. A solid brick building contrasted against a highly glass and metal building, using warm tones and textured fenestration that gradually transitions from the neighborhood. Next slide, please. As we sat down and thought about how this building sits in the South Boston neighborhood, we really wanted to understand its surroundings. And it is key to reflecting the character of South Boston. On Streets M and East First Street, there are existing triple-decker homes that showcase vibrantly painted wood siding and brick structures. The simple industrial character of 1898 is enhanced with patinaed copper downspouts and gutters. The contemporary architecture of the Seaport waterfront was also reviewed, with particular appreciation to the Moakley Courthouse building, noted for its juxtaposition when integrating of traditional materials and modern glass. We envisioned adopting a similar approach when integrating 1898 building with Block E. These visual references have informed our refined strategy to seamlessly incorporate the new development into the fabric of South Boston. Next slide. Our analysis also of the surrounding approved blocks also informed a distinctive design for Block E in 1898. And a note just in the upper right-hand corner there, the patinaed copper opening of the turbine hall. The understanding of the neighborhood structures was essential for ensuring a cohesive yet differentiated aesthetic within the overall development. Next slide, please. And this is a key aspect to the refinements that we've made to the design that we're presenting today. The window wall ratio for vision glazing is crucial to meeting the performance requirements for passive house certification. To achieve the target window wall ratio of 35% representing the maximum glazing allowed for passive house compliance. While responding to contextual variations, the design for the north, east, west, and south facades employ varying widths of metal panel coupled with varying depths of metal fins projecting from the building. This strategically balances the overall glazing percentage and subtly transitions the material expression of the building enclosure with its surroundings. And we'll talk more about that in the details here. Next slide, please. The facade and its materiality are key elements of connecting Block E with its surroundings. We've studied the color of the triple glazing that's going to be required for the passive house, metal panels and fins in various patinas. The color of aged patina copper is a complex and captivating and a dynamic blend of blues, greens, and browns that shift depending on the environment and the age of the oxidation. We've incorporated a gradient strategy of those earthy colors from the waterfront to the neighborhood character. And you can see that on the partee on the far right-hand side there, with north being up, illustrating sort of the fins at the top is the images, the color of the material is the paint that's sort of in the middle, and then sort of the transition is what we're looking for at the bottom. So you're starting to see sort of our approach to creating sort of an interesting variation to the facade.
2
Go back.
minutes, Devin.
Next slide, please. Yep. Commissioners were concerned about the silvery blue glass, no facade differentiation, and balconies look dark, not to be integrated, look dark and not integrated. So next slide, please. Building on previous feedback, we've incorporated several design refinements. Historic brick building is paired with a modern glass and metal panel building. We've implemented an earthy material gradient to complement the surrounding context and accentuate the gently curved form. We refine the gradient articulation to emphasize material transitions from key vantage points. We lightened the balconies and added warm materials, and we activated the ground plane with retail elements such as exposed columns, canopies, and transparent glazing. We also introduced a ribbon balcony at the amenity level on Edison Plaza to enhance the pedestrian realm. Next slide, please. You'll see there's a variation between the north and the south facades. In this illustration here, you're starting to see the patina copper on the north side and the sort of the shiny or the dirty penny on the tarnished penny on the south side of the facade there, with the varying range of solidness on the south side. Next slide, please. And then we looked at both the east and west facades, and the west facade with its gently sloping roof line uses a gradient of color, fins, and metal panel widths ranging from patina copper to tarnished penny, and the balcony expression is elegantly integrated into the material expression. Next slide, please. You also see that on the east facade. Next slide, please. The vertical fins and metal panels extend to the ground at the center of the building, but stop short of the hotel's corner restaurant, providing visibility into the activity of the restaurant. Its expression features blue-green terracotta exposed columns, recessed transparent glazing, canopies designed to mitigate wind, and outdoor seating to enhance the pedestrian experience. Next slide, please. This is just a previous illustration of the entry into the 1898 from the plaza. Next slide. And then activating the ground plane adjacent to Edison Plaza creates a more vibrant pedestrian experience. The rendering shows the retail corners design, which features blue-green terracotta exposed columns, recessed transparent storefront glass, canopies to mitigate wind, and the outdoor seating will improve the pedestrian interaction. A similar approach will be used at the restaurant, which I just talked about. Next slide, please. And then kind of completing the walk around the building. This image illustrates the view of the pedestrians emerging from the Edison Turbine Hall and perceiving the hotel and residential lobbies, along with the flush vehicular drop-off that reveals the front of the 1898 Turbine Hall, showcasing the pedestrian flow to each entry. Next slide, please. And I will conclude with this presentation on the last slide that illustrates the successful integration of the historic Turbine Hall with a contemporary, elegant, articulated tower that's grounded with a sense of place in this modern South Boston neighborhood. I look forward to hearing your comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kernst and Devin, for coming back to us with these changes. I'm looking forward to hearing from the commissioners as well. I couldn't help but notice on your slide 7 the image of the courthouse and the context of the seaport at the time of this image and how much has changed.
And our sights is in the
So,
distance out there as well.
yes, so it was perfect to actually showcase where 776 Summer is, but that would certainly not be the view today. So thanks for that historic context. All right, commissioners, please feel free to raise your Zoom hands if you would like to make a comment. And David Manfredi, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Linda. I want to thank the proponent for going beyond our comments. I think that when you were here last, we really focused. We were very appreciative of the progress that it made from previous presentations, and it has been a steady progression to, I think, of improvement. What we really focused on was how the building meets the ground and how the ground floor, the architecture of the ground floor could actually accommodate the kind of activation that you were producing in the layout and programming of the ground floor with more retail and restaurant kind of spaces. But I think what you did address that, but you also took a step further in terms of, I think, the energy of the building, the response to its solar orientations that gives it character, a quite elegant and subtle change in color as you move around, but also in the proportions of your vertical elements. Hence why I say I think you went beyond our comments in a very positive way. Have made this you made this a better building, I think, every time you've been back. And I'm glad we brought you back one more time because it got even better still. So thank you for your responsiveness. I think it's a really nice tower. And I think the proportions are nice. I think how it meets the ground is greatly improved. I love, by the way, the element of that terrace. I don't know if it's on 3, but you're adding another layer of kind of human detail, all of which is greatly appreciated, made the building better. So thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. McYoung?
Yeah, I haven't seen this project since you guys came to full commission before, but I also think that the project has really improved in terms of the 2 various scales. I mean, this is a big project in its totality, and the way in which Block E meets the context has really improved. I think it's really strengthened. And then the second, which is the entry sequences and the drop off and all of that, I think has really been, yeah, that's really been improved. So I really appreciate how much you've responded to our fellow commissioners to improve the project. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Thank you, McYoung. Shauna?
Again, Devin, thank you very much for the presentation. It's, as I have seen this at a number of different points, and as we discussed the last meeting, this change to the drop off is really significantly different. The one thing that I'm curious about, and I can't quite put in my head, maybe if we could go to page 2 or 3, maybe do 3 first and then 2 second. Let's go to the next page and then we'll come back to this page. What I'm really curious is what happens to the left of this image, because almost all of the images we're seeing of this sort of beautiful drop off, we're not seeing the adjacent turbine hall. And I know in a previous presentation, there had been a really beautiful passage through the adjacent turbine hall. And then, so if we go back to 2 for a second, which, oh, this isn't the one, maybe the next one, this one. Yeah, if you could zoom in on the kind of that bottom right, it seems when you're coming from the very bottom, seems a somewhat bottom of the plan, very bottom of the plan, actually. Through, is that
Yes, that's
when
the
you're
entrance.
going through this, the between turbine two? So that is still a pretty less than perfect connection when you come through this beautiful archway, and then you're sort of framed with the hedge and in front of you. And it's not, I'm not saying this is a big deal, this is a super, super minor thing, but I think since that is such a beautiful experience walking through this hole that's kind of busting through T2, it's something that you and your very talented team can continue to develop as you go forward. But I've been exceptionally
Yeah, this is actually this is sort of just inside the threshold here. So there's actually a patinaed copper that's framing the opening through the brick material there.
maybe
And
it's
so we were
not
trying to illustrate
proportional. So it may be, I mean, because the diagram looks like you have to, as a pedestrian, you have to do this sort of wiggle thing.
Okay.
If it's the blue line. Anyway, I'm just, the project is extremely impressive. You've been very responsive throughout. And from an open space perspective, it's a very exciting and I imagine very inhabitable at multiple scales and people of small groups, large groups. I just thought that this was one moment that could be developed a little bit stronger.
And we'll continue to work on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shauna. Any other commissioner comments? Anne Marie, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate your detailed presentation and adjustments to the design. I think my comment will probably sound familiar to people who've heard me make this comment before. And it's, I guess, it is a growing concern I have about the prevalence of glass towers that we're seeing in all of these developments. And I'm just curious, I guess this is a broader, I want to respect the process that's taken place and my colleagues' comments, but I'd just like to kind of put the question out there as we think about development in Boston in the future. So much of what contributes to the character of our city is a sense of texture and diversity. And that's something that, while I understand the careful attention to color of the glazing and the panels, just wonder if there couldn't be opportunities in projects like these to introduce some different types of materials, because it is difficult for me when I look at this tower to see this unique place where it's located. It's an extraordinary setting at the juncture of a former industrial site with a historic power plant and kind of one of our classic Boston neighborhoods. Yet the tower resembles towers that we're seeing go up across the city. So I just, again, encourage all of us that are participating in the design and the design review process of the city to think about how we might approach these projects differently in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. We always appreciate you zooming out and asking us to zoom out too and think about these larger questions. Any other commissioners? I'll add just one comment that hasn't yet been addressed. Could we go to slide 18? This is minor, but as I was looking at this slide and slide 16, it just struck me that the way that this building hits the ground, the change in material and coloration with that kind of green patina just feels like a kind of one too many moves. And I really encourage you all to think about how it hits the ground. What could the fenestration of that column be? Maybe as a way to integrate the coloration all the way down to the ground and create a different type of expression. I think the public realm is going to be that first floor, floor and a half. And so I think the way that the pedestrians will experience this building is going to be at that level. And I just love to see just that one little extra bit of refinement and study happen for this building. All right, Christina, I don't see any other commissioner hands. Do we have any public comment?
At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and I'll call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press *9 on your dial pad to activate the raise hand function and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time, I see no hands raised, so we will close the public comment period.
Thank you so much, Christina. And I think like we do for most projects, even though we've already made our recommendations for the rest of phase 2, that a motion is still in order here. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right.
So I think the recommendation would be just for Block E.
Great. So just with that clarification, do we have a motion from the commissioners?
Motion to approve. Is that right?
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Jonathan Garland,
I will abstain.
Shauna Gilly-Smith,
Aye.
Mik-Young Kim,
Aye.
Anne Marie Lubenow,
Abstain.
David Manfredi,
Aye.
David Nagahiro,
Aye.
Lara Solano,
Aye.
and myself, Linda Eastley, aye. Thank you for coming back to us with the presentation, and we will have this project continue on with the planning department staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
All right. Christina, could you invite Mimi and Kirk back in for our second project, which is 3430 and 3440 Washington Street in Jamaica Plain. This is the proponent's third presentation to us, and we do not have any recorded recusals for this project. Commissioners Evans, Cotteritas, Morris, and Solano were at the last subcommittee, and myself as well. And of those, I think, Lara, it's just you and me from the last subcommittee that are here today. And so, Laura, we'll have you start with comments after the presentation. And with that, we'll have the proponent go ahead and share their screen.
Good evening. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. Nice to see all of you. We'll quickly go through our presentation and look forward to receiving and hearing your comments after this and continuing the discussion. This presentation will be on the project at 3430 and 3440 Washington Street in Jamaica Plain. This project consists of two sites, two lots that both have frontage along Washington Street that resides just south of the Green Street station in Jamaica Plain and resides also in the Plan JP Rocks overlay planning initiative of Jamaica Plain. Both of the sites are bisected by two side roads that are residential roads by nature. The first being Rockville that runs in between the two sites, and the second being Ken Road that runs on the right side of that 3440 Washington Street lot. Just to give kind of a quick overview for those who have not seen the project thus far, it does include the construction of two new mixed-use buildings consisting of a total of 230 residential units, just over 6,000 square feet of retail and commercial space. The two sites, as mentioned, reside in a local industrial zoning subdistrict, but fall within that JP Rocks planning overlay. The proposed 3430 Washington Street building on the left side of this graphic here is proposed to be at 6 stories tall, while the 3440 Washington Street building on the right side is proposed to be 5 stories tall. Some of the main concepts and design principles that have been governing us through this design have been: one, take a look at the context and how the building relates and fits into the surrounding neighborhood fabric. Two, to develop the massing and scale, bridging the gap between the commercial scale along Washington Street here and the existing residential neighborhoods at the back towards the south along Rockville Circle and Kenton Road. To take a look at the open space in the public realm experience along all sides of each site. And to look at the material and the material palette and how it speaks to the sort of dynamic existing building typologies, but also the new proposals that are going up along the Washington Street corridor. So revisiting what we have been through so far with the commission here, our first BCDC meeting was back in December of last year. There were several concerns on the building massing and the scale as it approaches the residential neighborhood. We were asked to explore open space along the ground floor on all sides. We were also asked to take a closer look at the materiality and how it relates to that context, and also to establish a sense of gateway between Washington Street and that residential neighborhood to the south. At the most recent BCDC subcommittee, which occurred in April 15th to be exact, we made some serious design changes to the overall massing, as you can see from the 2 images here, which we'll get to in a little bit. But we were asked to explore more open space opportunities, specifically along Rockville Circle and Kenton Road, explore facade step backs at the single-story podium areas that you can see here and on the back. We were asked to simplify the material palette and to have a clear kind of story of why each material is being used in a specific way, to study the frontage zone along Washington Street, and to specifically look at the colonnade that we are creating outside of the retail, its material use and its scale. And we were asked to create a more continuous planting layout along Washington Street. So as you can see, there's some gaps kind of within those planting zones and tree areas. This is the current design, and taking a look, kind of a step back from where we were between the last 2 BCDC meetings, which we think is important to overview, is how we derive the massing of the 2 structures that you see today. The first is obviously just an extrusion of the site. The second starts to set back on all sides to create a more robust, not only sidewalk zone, but furnishing zone and planting zone along each sidewalk. From there, we created carve-outs of the massing up above the first floor for courtyards, both being oriented not only for access to direct sunlight, but also as a way to transition to those residential neighborhoods at the back of Kenton Road and Rockville Circle. And then the last step is really to create additional open space on that ground floor and enhance the public realm by creating entry plaza areas on the front on Washington Street and stepping back the massing as we approach those residential neighborhoods. So just kind of taking a look of, again, where we have been and where we are. This far left image was the first time we presented. From there, we made some significant steps in creating entry plazas along Washington Street. Again, the massing of above was shifted so that the courtyards are facing more towards those residential neighborhoods. We increased the sidewalks on all sides, but primarily as the building massing transitions back down Rockville Circle and Kenton Road. We also introduced townhouse typology along the ground floor in the rear of both of these sites. And we also increased significantly the rear setback of both of the buildings, primarily on the 3440 side, where it went from 10 feet to 20 feet to help kind of bridge that, again, that gap from the kind of more commercial Washington Street side to the residential side. And this is where we are now. Some of the major changes that we made since the subcommittee meeting, as you can see, the 2 podium levels were stepped back even further. creating a more robust sidewalk condition that allows for purchasing zone with bike parking spaces and planting areas. We also added planting beds along Washington Street to continue that street tree planting kind of layout and organization along the frontage. And then we also decreased the size of the colonnade corners that we're using to really emphasize the massing at each corner of each building. We decreased the size of the columns themselves to allow for more pedestrian access in and out between these spaces, and to also encourage exterior seating for some of these retail and potentially restaurant spaces for the future. So taking a closer look at kind of each one of those zones, the first one being the Washington Street side, we introduced some raised planting areas. Again, these column areas. We split up the blue bike station so that we have a more continuous street tree planting area. We also did, in our last iteration, introduce a bus bulb that kind of sits outside of that sidewalk zone to kind of further separate that pedestrian area from the proposed bus stop. And that raised planter really signifies and emphasizes the kind of residential lobby areas, as you can see here. This is taking a look down the 3430 Washington Street sidewalk. Again, this is where we were previously. This is where we are now, decreasing the overall column size, introducing some new lighter materials within these colonnade areas to lighten up that pedestrian field. This is taking a look at the 3440 Washington Street sidewalk. Again, lighter materials and some of the things, but in terms of the open space, you can see those raised planting areas signifying the entry points for the residents, the separate furnishing zones, the 6-foot minimum planting zone, and then the 6-foot sidewalk as well. Taking a look at as we transition back to those residential neighborhoods, Rockville Circle, these sidewalks start to increase, specifically even further at the 1-story podium, where we're reaching sidewalk depths or total depths of 18.5 feet. And then also along the back of the 3440 site, where we're increasing it from previously what was 12 and 14. Now we're up to 15 and 17 feet, increasing those planting areas that are outside of the townhouse units, and allowing for a more kind of robust planting area in both cases. This is taking a look down the Rockville Circle sidewalk. Again, you can see that step back occurring here on that 1-story podium. And again, that allows us to not only introduce new planting areas, but also maintain those visitor bike parking spaces outside of the bike.
2-minute warning, Mark.
Again, looking at the Kenton Road and that step back that's occurring on the ground floor here at that podium level. I'll quickly go through this. The rear park area that we increased specifically on the 3440 side, now being at 20 feet with access to those townhouse areas and kind of robust planting beds that not only occur outside of the townhouse entry points, but also on the other side of this walkway here, buffering between the residential existing properties. This is taking a look at that rear landscape townhouse entry park area. And then getting into the material, taking a look at what's existing around us, what's proposed around us on either side of Washington Street, and the residential neighborhoods to the rear, and what material is being used there and how that can give us insight as to what we want to do for these two projects. So as kind of a broad overview, along Washington Street, we're trying to highlight these corners with a brick and split face block on the ground floor, kind of a heavier CMU material that coincides with a lot of the Washington Street materials that are found not only being proposed, but existing as well. And as we transition back, these brick material kind of degrades away into more residential materials. So a metal vertical panel, a horizontal metal panel that correlates more with the residential kind of lap siding that we would typically find. And then that material that's used primarily for that transition also occurs at the entry points for each building outside of the residential lobby here in the middle. So taking a look at those zones along Washington Street, that lightening up that we requested last time we met with the subcommittee on the ground floor here, that kind of middle zone of the brick that carries down in those colonnades. And then also that kind of really the breakup in material at the residential entry point that correlates back to that residential transitioning material at the rear. And then at the top, the step backs that occur in each building are kind of further emphasized by that vertical seam middle panel. So some of the detailing, we try to further emphasize and simplify the corners along Washington Street here by reintroducing kind of that darker material that you find at the step backs up above, but only at the corners of where Washington Street interacts with Kenton Road and Rockville Circle. The colonnade areas, we lightened up the materials using kind of a lighter wood panel soffit to lighten up that pedestrian experience, and kind of same idea behind the light gray split face CMU on the ground floor. Some horizontal brick pattern that it further emphasizes the horizontal feel of the Washington Street facade and decreases the overall verticality. And then taking a look as that kind of transitions back, this is along Kenton Road. Again, that more residential materiality and some of the detailing of where we have the massing up above, that material kind of continues down, but then when it switches to that one-story podium level and steps back in plane, we kind of switch back to a brick material. And then also further emphasizing some of the townhouse entry points by just some window accent panels, again, that correlate with that darker metal panel previously mentioned. So this is we were also asked to take a look at from the athletic field across the street. This is taking a look there where the two projects would reside, the 3430 on the left here, 3440, kind of in the middle here. And then this 3458 Washington Street is a project that is already approved as a small project review to the right of us, but just giving a kind of total scale of all of it there. Zooming in a little bit here, again, looking down Washington Street, we can see that kind of continuation of street trees, that condition on the corners of Washington Street, Kent Road, and Rockville, where the corners become emphasized by that darker material. And again, that mostly brick material covering Washington Street to not only relate to the approved projects to the left and right when looking from Washington Street, but also to kind of relate to a lot of the larger contexts within along Washington Street that mainly utilize that brick material.
Mark, that's time.
That's basically, we're at the end anyways.
Thank you, Mark. Could we have you put up a site plan, maybe slide 5, just to get the commissioners started? Great. Thank you for that. And again, we had a handful of commissioners that were at the subcommittee in mid-April. And I think Laura and I are representing that tonight. And then we'll start with Laura and then open the floor to any other comments as well.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Thank you for the presentation. I will say that on Rockville and Kenton Road, you've done a much better job of how the building meets the public realm. It feels much more integrated. Before, I felt it sort of was just an extension of the larger building, and now it feels as if there is a real distinction between them. You could imagine that those facades were built at different times, and I think the way that you've integrated the open space on the second floor is also nice. I will say that while I think that the improvements on actually, could we go to the next? Yeah, there you go. I think that the Washington Street public realm improvements are good. I still wonder about sort of the color that, whether or not it's too dark underneath those overhangs. And I know that you actually made some changes to that in material, but I'd be interested to hear what others say about that. The last thing I'll say is that Rockville Circle is really dark. I think it's in some pretty good shade from both of the buildings. And I'd love it if you go over what the materials are on that side. I dare say there's probably very little sun ever coming on the first 2/3 of the street from Washington Street. So I just would love to hear a review again of what those materials are on Rockville.
Sure. Let me actually scroll down to we have some elevations here. I think it'll be a little bit easier to explain.
Oh, good. Okay.
So taking a look at I guess first the 3430 side, which would probably see more sunlight just because it is facing more south than the 3440 side. The material on the front towards Washington Street being on the left here is that brick material that kind of continues along some of the ground floor here. On the other side of that courtyard, this is that second floor open courtyard area. We're transitioning to that very light gray horizontal metal paneling, which again, we're hoping kind of helps transition to the residential neighborhoods behind, but we also do have kind of sort of a built-in buffer at the back of the 3430 site where we have some existing trees. There's about a 35-foot area of grass area before you reach a road that kind of goes up to a multi-family behind us. So some of this transitioning is a little bit easier. I think the transitioning that we see on the other side, we try to transition much quicker into that lighter material from Washington Street, which is actually on the right here, looking at the 3440 building. And then we start to also try to demass a lot of kind of the main massing by introducing those balcony spaces, that rhythmic pattern of balcony spaces, and further really emphasizing those step backs at the back between what is on this side, on the Rockville side, an existing, it's one continuous building, but it's a multi-family building at 21 to 31 Rockville Circle. So that sort of descales a little bit less on the Rockville Circle side, bringing that massing away from the Kent Road elevation, which obviously on Kent Road, we're dealing with much more typical single-family, two-family residential homes. So that was kind of the ideas behind the massing, pulling it away, and the materiality, again, in both of them, is meant to transition to that much lighter metal paneling, the horizontal metal paneling that's supposed to kind of emulate the fiber cement feel of traditional.
And then on the Rockville Circle elevation on the lower right-hand side, the material that is on the bottom of the building, and comparing that to its neighbor on the left, are those the same material? One is lighter than the other, the darker facade, or I guess the north?
Are you talking about between both of our buildings or between?
No, I'm not supposed to draw, but for clarity, I will this versus this. Are these the same material or are they different material?
Between the two different buildings, both of them are using brick. They're just two different shades of brick. So the 3430 site, as a way to relate to that existing industrial living to the left that's being developed as a residential, we're using an iron spot red brick that closely correlates that. It transitions on the 3440 side into pewter frost brick that's a little bit lighter color in nature. And kind of more of a, I want to call it gray, but it's like a gray beige tone to it.
A warmer tone.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate it. Mimi and then Anne Marie.
Thank you. I needed to unmute. I haven't seen this project in a while since the probably introduction. I will say that in terms of the massing and in thinking about setbacks and adjacencies to the neighboring context, I think you really made some excellent, changes to transition down to those buildings. So kudos to the team for accommodating that and those requests, because I think that was really critical. My comments tonight are really about the architecture, and maybe we could go to the diagram that shows how you're deploying the materials. In general, I think there's a lot going on, and I do think that you can simplify. And I wonder if it would be, something that you consider is having all of Washington Street, for instance, be the brick cladding. There's just a couple of moments where you're introducing a white horizontal metal siding that I don't know that it's really adding value to the composition. And I just think that simplifying it to have all one material, and I understand the trade-off of cost, but it really, I don't see the value that material is adding to the composition. And I would, encourage you maybe perhaps on the side. I don't know these streets as well as my colleagues who've been reviewing this, but maybe you reduce the trade-off for brick along the side streets to have it on Washington Street. The busyness of the material choices, I think, could be further refined. So that's in terms of the overall elevation. I do think that enlightening the ground floor, and if you can go to one of those perspectives, I do think the lightning makes sense, and I, support that idea. I don't know if the material choice is right in a CMU block. There's something that, and I know it's a ground face block, which seems, like to me, that doesn't, have the characteristic of an interior arcade material. That seems like a more massive wall than a wall with porous openings. So that's another area where I think it would be best to consider alternate materials with, as you continue to develop this with the staff. And then lastly, I'll just talk about, again, just a request to simplify. I think there's corbelling that's used, a lot of brick corbelling that I'm seeing, but I don't even know if it's necessary or, it could be deployed at different locations. If you go back to the perspective of the storefront where you have the brick columns and then the corbelling right above it. That feels to me like an uncomfortable moment, and I acknowledge it's a detail, but I do think it's in the resolutions of how the building comes down and how the material resolves itself that will make this a really nice and contributing project to the area. So while I think the overall project, is in terms of massing and program on the ground floor, I know there was a lot of discussion of that has been resolved. I do encourage further development and further study of the architecture with the planning department.
Thank you, Mimi. Anne Marie?
Thank you for your presentation. Like Mimi, it's been a while since I've seen this project. I really appreciate the attention you've put into this project and how it meets the surrounding context and the nuanced approach to how it meets the more commercial side of Washington Street and the smaller scale residential side. I also really appreciate the texture and rhythm and proportion of windows. I think that does a lot to add some visual interest and texture. I think overall your strategy concerning the approach to the diversity of materials makes sense. When I zoom out, I think it is very, very strong. I have some questions about some of the detailing of that, but feel confident that that can be resolved over time. I think in some ways, actually, though I do have a question about a close-up of the material palette, and I'm looking at the draft, which probably does not align with this, but there is a brick in the draft. There's slides 23, 24, and 25 that have some brick patterning that looks, that sort of stands out when I look at it, and it seems a little more subtle. Definitely seems more subtle in this presentation, which I like. So I just encourage you to continue working on that. I think overall it is, a very integrated approach, and in many ways you've created a far more challenging project than the previous one we saw, simply by virtue of all the small scale detail and variation you've introduced. So thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Other commissioner comments tonight? I wanted to share just two thoughts. The first is to thank this team for thinking through those facade step backs, and I thought we could take a quick look at slide 19. This was one of the areas that we had talked about at the first presentation at the monthly meeting, and there was kind of an uncomfortableness about dropping here in height without having a stronger material change, and also the fact that they were coplanar or almost coplanar at the time. And so I appreciate you adding some of that articulation there. I think for me it works a lot better, so thank you. And the other comment really restates what Mimi said. I think if we go to slide 17, I really like the simplification of materials, and I'm questioning particularly kind of the white siding that Mimi brought up as well, and a curiosity about whether simplifying the material palette for both buildings, not only on Washington Street, but on the side streets as well, would actually help to improve the legibility of the building. And so I would encourage you to continue thinking about that and working with the city on what some of those opportunities might be for simplification. And we do have two other, David Manfredi, your hand went down. So Kirk, we'll go ahead and have
thank you. I wanted to just ask a bit about site lighting and arcade lighting in particular, because you have an awful lot of overhang space that, while it's open and active and uses are being available to the public, that'll be fine. I guess I wonder what that arcade is like in the evening, and both in terms of passive surveillance and also comfort. So do you have a shot of a night shot by chance?
We do not in this presentation. It is something that we could put together. We were, just to speak a little bit, we were obviously thinking of down recess lighting within that canopy space. Not only that, but the larger glass openings having obviously light emitting from those. So that's kind of logic behind keeping the light towards Washington Street in terms of the light being emitted. We did have some neighbor concerns about being light towards the rear of the property. But
yeah, well, that'd be great to have. And I think, even thinking about the sidewalks and how much of that will spill over and cut off angles, and, just in general, making this a very comfortable place, given the amount of arcade. So that's all I had. Thank you, Linda.
Thanks, Kirk. Appreciate it. David, I see your raised hand again.
I took it down because I think you said what I was going to say, but I'll say it again for emphasis, I guess. I do think that you've done good work from where you were to where you are, and I think you can continue to simplify. That there's still, as this slide shows, there's still a lot of different materials and different ways that they're used, and I think simpler not in I think your big moves are good and got better. And obviously the introduction of the townhouses and the much better edges on especially on the first two floors, greatly improved. But I do think you can simplify a little bit more and it will get stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any additional raised hands from commissioners. So Christina, do we have any public comment?
At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and staff will call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press star 9 on your dial pad to activate the raise hand function and star 6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, at this time, I see no hands raised, so we will close the public comment period.
Thank you, Christina. Quiet night so far. Commissioners, before we entertain a motion, I just wanted to share some of the notes that I took from the commissioner comments. And if it's appropriate, maybe these make it into our recommendations. The first was about materials. I think there were a number of comments about simplifying those materials, also the appropriateness of things like the split face CMU and corbelling. And then the other comment I'll raise is the one about lighting. We weren't able to see the building during kind of different parts of the day and night, so that had been a recommendation that would be an important thing to look at. So with those notes and other things that you've heard, do we have a motion?
I'll try a motion to approve with the recommendations as Linda stated about simplifying materials and comprehensively thinking about lighting around the site. I believe that these recommendations can be worked through the staff at a staff level. And so the motion is to approve with continuing staff review based on our recommendations.
Great, thank you, Mimi. So a couple of provisos for our recommendation. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Great, and all those in favor, please say aye. Jonathan Garland,
Abstain.
Shauna Gilly-Smith,
Aye.
McYoung Kim,
Aye.
Mimi Love,
Aye.
Anne Marie Lubenow,
Aye.
David Manfredi,
Aye.
David Nagahiro,
Abstain.
Laura Solano,
Aye.
Kirk Sykes,
Aye.
and myself, Linda Eastley, aye. We will have this project continue on with the planning department staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for all your help. Thank you.
Good night, Mark. All right, our last project this evening is 75 and 75A Morrissey Boulevard. That's in Dorchester. This is the fourth meeting with us, and Commissioner Nagahiro is recused on this project. So David, we just invite you to hide your video and mute your microphone, and then we'll have you join us at the closeout. Commissioners Gilly-Smith, Haseen, and Solano were at the last subcommittee, and so we'll welcome your comments first, Shauna and Laura. And we also have a number of other commissioners that have been part of subcommittees that are welcome to, of course, share their thoughts and perspective as well. The former meeting was David Haseen, Mimi Love, Catherine Morris, Laura Solano, and Kirk Sykes, and myself. So we are ready for the team to share their screen.
Great. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Joe Pucci with CPT Architects. Myself, along with Carl Fischauer, are happy to share updates to the 75 Morrissey project based on feedback received during the subcommittee component of this review. Just to reorient everyone, the project is phase one of the broader master plan, bounded by Morrissey Boulevard to the east, South Line to the south, and 93 to the west. Building A is along 93, Building B is along Morrissey, and they both surround a community park. We started by defining our overall guiding principles for the project. First, by reorienting the footprints of the building to better relate to existing and future open spaces based on solar orientation as well. Then we've pulled the bulk of the massing out to the periphery of the site and have shaped those massings based on the infrastructure that each building is surrounded by. So 93, that curvilinear form of that highway informing the principal volume of Building A. And then the axial nature of Morrissey Boulevard, creating that edge for Building B. From there, we've stepped down the massings of the buildings and have created further articulation into the massings towards that central open space. We've made significant advancements and enhancements to the overall massing of Building B. So starting on the left where we were at that intro meeting back in April, moving on to subcommittee, we've pulled that massing out to be in alignment with Morrissey Boulevard, moving away from that kind of kinked form that we initially showed. We've increased the height of the podium to 3 stories to better relate to existing and future datums. And we've flattened out that street wall to better reinforce the urban conditions of that sidewalk. We've employed a more slender form to the narrow ends of the building to better relate to the overall diagram of Building A. So again, that kind of brother-sister relationship that we heard in the first intro meeting coming into fruition here in these advancements. And from there, we further refined the massing by bringing that tower down to grade to create that, gateway condition into the site and announce kind of the entry into the site here, and pulled the massing back to open up the corner and provide more public realm at the intersection of A Street and Morrissey Boulevard to invite folks who are moving up along Morrissey Boulevard into the site. Additionally, we've set that lobby volume back further to open up sight lines into that community space even further. On the south side of the building, again, we've reoriented the massing to be more axial in nature along Morrissey Boulevard, holding that corner between the future street wall and the South Line building. Here you can see that relationship of that masonry cornice line of South Line finding its way into the 3-story datum of the podium. And then we've stepped down that massing towards the open space in a series of volumes. From there, we further refined the massing by employing that slender bookend language again up at the end of the building. So now setting up a diagram between the north and the south, a dialogue there. And then we've dropped a portion of that volume down to grade to create an entry point into the community space as a response to feedback. So activating an otherwise unactivated edge of the building. On the park face of the building, we've employed the same sort of diagram here. So breaking down that massing and employing a more slender proportion and more elegant facade language on that slender edge. And then broke down the podium even further at that community space to create more of an indoor-outdoor expression, opportunities for seating underneath the building, and more transition space at that kind of special moment of program fronting the park. And we'll hear more about that later on in the landscape portion of the project or the presentation. On Building A, we've made enhancements to the lobby expression of the building. It's a much more subdued diagram now compared to where we were. This was a little bit of a tenuous relationship between the portal of the lobby and the principal face of the tower. So we're simplifying the language a bit, creating some datums that relate to the overall form of the building, and then returning that podium expression to the tower to create a little bit more of a cleaner diagram there. The lobby grabs the corner of the park and A Street, and we're uniting those two moves with a canopy that wraps the corner to create an address on A Street, as well as the park. So you can see in the overall diagram, massing diagram of the buildings, they're much more in line in terms of a shared diagram. The slender ends of the building are treated in a similar kind of curtain wall vertical expression that frame those more narrow ends of the building at the two edges along the highway, as well as Morrissey Boulevard, as well as those ends that front the community park. Building B, or facade B, those longer ends, is where we start to differentiate the two massings. So along the highway, a more horizontal mass or a reading to reinforce that curvilinear nature of the highway. And on building B, a more vertical expression to reinforce that breaking down of the massing and stepping down towards the community park. The buildings are also united in their podium expression, a medium iron spot masonry language that has a more punched opening to reinforce the residential nature of the podium, and then a more kind of traditional storefront language at the base of the building as well. You can see here the overall evolution of building B has changed dramatically from where we were at the intro meeting. So creating a more slender form on the ends, that more glassy vertical nature expression relating to building A. So again, that relationship kind of being strengthened. And then warming up the overall palette of the building to be much more residential feeling as well. That was kind of a key piece of feedback that we received from both the city and subcommittee. And starting to animate the panels a little bit more to create some movement within the overall diagram of the building. You can see that rich kind of podium language finding its way into the base of the building as well, compared to where we were, which was received as kind of a more commercial reading initially. Here's an overall look at both buildings in unison. So again, that glacier treatment framing the gateway to the site here, the tower landing at grade, inviting people in, and then that much more kind of residential expression in both the tower and the podium language. On building A, we've also warmed up the overall palette of the building and have started to introduce a little bit more movement in the panels of the building so that at speed, when you're driving by this building, you can start to register different kind of treatments of the facade that traces its way up the building in the way that the accent panels orient themselves in the tower. But again, a much more brother-sister relationship between the two buildings here, as you can see on the screen here. So similar overall palette and diagram, but differentiations in how the longer faces of the buildings are treated per their surroundings. From here, I'll hand it over to Carl to walk through some of the landscape enhancements.
Thanks, Joe. Again, Carl Freshour with Arcadis. And before I jump into the modifications to the open space, I wanted to revisit the guiding principles real quick. And our guiding principles were connectivity, connectivity today, serving the Savin Hill neighborhood, South Line, and also individuals traveling from the T through our site. And then in the future, making sure that this has a good connection to New Main Street and the future network of open space. Really focusing on urbanity and making sure that we have urban edges everywhere that the architecture touches the open space to really reinforce that. And then creating one park with 3 rooms. Next slide, Joe. In front of you is an evolution of the design, primarily the central open space, and the design on the left was the original plan we presented, and a lot of the comments were it felt a little too suburban, too much lawn, too much green against the building, and pathways that just funneled pedestrians through the site. After our first meeting with Urban Design Subcommittee, we really started to rethink how we could start to craft this space and create some synergy and some communication between the architecture and the open space, and really start to develop a series of spaces within a space that you can discover and enjoy daily. But in the center image there, it still had the tension with the architecture pinch point. And so from there, we come to the right image, which is where we are today. And it shows the new architectural facade on Building B, which opened up the aperture of the park. We've peeled back some planters to create good sight lines and mobility to the community room that's deep within the space. And we started to create an edge to what we're calling the Gateway Plaza that faces A Street that still allows visual sight lines into the space, but creates a little bit of an edge. And we removed the shade structure. We all agreed that it was causing a little too much pressure on the center point of the open space.
Time check,
next
Carl.
Yep. Okay, so I'll speed through these. So Joe, the next slide. The next slide shows the overall master plan and the Gateway Plaza in the, facing A Street. We had the gathering zone in the middle of the space where we still have a performance stage that faces the open lawn area. Day to day, it's a respite for residents and visitors, but it also can create overspill space for the community and civic space and an expanded hardscape area outside of the community space for events that might happen in the evening. Little pockets of discovery, like on the south end of the lawn where there's an Adirondack chair grouping where there could be some elevation to it, and then some little hidden pathways along a bosque of trees along Tower A's amenity edge there. Next slide, Joe. So this is a view with my back towards A Street. We have Tower A on the right, Tower B lobbies on the left, and creating berming with planting materials and large generous seats and just creating moments of discovery as you move through the space. And you might see the light installation that creates some animation in the Urban Gateway Plaza. And then you can start to see the layers as your eye moves through the space. Next slide, Joe. This is with my back towards Tower A lobby, looking towards Tower B. The lawn is to the right, and you see that little cluster of Adirondack chairs that's nestled in a berm of plant material, layers of plant material in the front that allow your eye to just kind of move through the space. The performance and stage area is center right there. And then we've even incorporated some porch swings off of the canopy at the community center, really trying to create a variety of spaces and uses throughout the park. And then the next slide, I believe, shows the overall vision of the site. And that concludes our formal presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Joe and Carl. Can you put up maybe a site plan to get us started? Terrific. All right. So Shauna and Laura, you were there at the last subcommittee, so I'll give you first dibs on comments and then we'll open up the floor.
I'll jump in because I probably have less to say since I was only at the final subcommittee and most of the hard work was done between the second and the third. I think from an architectural perspective and an overall massing perspective, I think this diagonal move to sort of simplify from a plan perspective to simplify the plaza made a very significant difference to the public realm. But I also well, and I'll just talk from the landscape perspective. I think and then we'll move to the architecture for a second. I think the sculpting of the lawn, the performance space, and I think the language has become more consistent since the last meeting, and I think it's a really lovely space. There's very, very beautiful elements within it. I think that the language could be further refined and simplified going forward, but I think overall the pieces are very nice and a very inhabitable space. Could we go to an architecture, one of the architectural views? So I think overall the stepping and as you mentioned, slender and elegantness has really come forward. I think this particular perspective, I think, seems heavier than some of the other ones to look at. I don't really know why. It may just be the rendering, but I think that also the language that we discussed at the last meeting of the the podium level stepping back in places to bring the tower all the way down to the ground not only makes the building more slender, but it also really emphasizes particular moments such as the entry. So I do think that it's developed a language that are of sort of siblings, but not exactly the same. I still think that this particular facade that we're looking at tricks my eyes. I know you had talked about the movement in the panelization, but for me, the movement in the panelization is still a little bit awkward in my eyes. It feels like a little bit of it moves too much for me. But that's my own perspective on it. And then I know I'll let Laura step in since she was on many more subcommittees than I was.
Commissioners, I know we have a lot of hands up. I did want to give Laura an opportunity if she would like to comment on the changes since the last subcommittee.
Thank you, Linda. The buildings have just come such a long way, and the moves that you have made have just successively made the landscape possibility so much better. So I appreciate that. I feel like the landscape and the buildings are really more than cousins. So if we could go to a plan. I have very few comments because I think that a lot of this has been work done really diligently over the multiple times we've seen this. And there are two small comments. I'm wondering whether or not the area where the Adirondack chairs in the community space is big enough, or whether or not there would be an allowance to have chairs in the open space. It seems for these size buildings that, you know, the 4 to 6 chairs that you can fit in there seems a little stingy. And then the other, which I know we've gone back and forth about, is on 8th Street, where it says Gateway Plaza, that mini planter there, I think needs to be worked on a little bit more in terms of scale. I know what you're doing there because you're really trying to fit a lot in that space. So I might suggest that it either goes away and you embrace that with art the way you've suggested completely, and let that be the piece that moves you through, or that you study how that might hold the scale of that edge. Doesn't feel like it's quite there yet. But other than that, I'm just really impressed with all of the progress that's been made over time. So I appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura and Shauna. Kirk,
Yeah,
like
thank
you have
you.
some comments?
I do. Thank you. I think when I last saw this, my comment had to do with the open space being the major public realm gift, and in somewhat a trade-off for some significant height impact. And so I had queried whether you had explored different ways of guiding the public into this space off of Morrissey. And in particular, I had asked you to think about looking at the ground floor plane, and in this image that you have here, it would be the upper right corner. Because one can imagine as these other blocks fill in, that you're really going to want some clear guidance that that space is a public benefit, that we want to bring you off of Morrissey, which is quite busy and congested, and will get better. But we want to bring you into this park that is quite beautiful, and you've done a great job. But I don't yet see some of the treatment of the ground floor plane. So if you go to the rendering of the corner, looking from this, go to the Morrissey Boulevard rendering, if you could. Yeah, here. So here, you know, I guess I had asked to think about how the first couple of floors gave that guidance to bring people off of Morrissey. And imagine a building where there's now a park on the right of this image. And imagine how you're going to notion that people will be let in. So my questions have to do with what have you done or what are you interested in doing to make that clear connection between the parkland and Morrissey Boulevard?
Yeah, I think I can speak to that from an architectural perspective. You know, where we were in May when we met, we had a very clear kind of podium expression that wrapped the corner, that really dominated that corner. So what we did as a response was we eroded that podium and pushed it back to open up more of that public realm and create a little bit of a plaza here at that corner with double retail expressions on either end. So you kind of know that there's something to move around that corner and up A Street. I think what is completing the diagram here, and if I go to my appendix, is what's going to happen in the future up the block here. So as part of the larger master plan, there is a future civic space allocated on the other side of A Street that will afford more of that gateway and threshold into the master plan itself. So I think these two moves working in unison will help to inform movement into the master plan itself and the kind of public realm components of that master plan.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I would just continue to encourage you, given the two-directional nature of Morrissey, to think about how to continue to work on the expression of the podium in a way that it sucks the public into the middle space that is the sort of major feature of your master plan, and will only get better as you build out your buildings. But I still think there's opportunities, both paving, articulation, differentiation that you can do and that staff can work on with you on that. So that's my major comment, Linda. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment, Kirk. Anne Marie?
Thank you. Like my fellow commissioners, I think this project has evolved quite a bit. I particularly appreciate the alignment of the massing along Morrissey Boulevard and the increased podium height. I would encourage you, as you continue to refine the design, to look for opportunities to introduce a little bit more continuity along the base of the building to further kind of unify and create a sense of place among these two structures. Similarly, with the animation of the panels, I have confidence in this team to carry this out, but just finding the balance of creating texture, the tension between visual interest and texture and kind of monotony, and just encourage you to think through that. If you could go to, I'm looking again at the draft presentation, but there's a view of the community park from the north. I'd like to take a look at. I think this one's a more evolved one than what I'm looking at. So I think just to echo Kirk's comments, I just encourage you, I really like you to think about the entrances to the buildings and help orient or signal to the visitor, as Kirk said, both thinking about the entrance to the development as a whole from Morrissey Boulevard, then once you're in the development, what indicates, a building entrance to, if I want to visit somebody or if I live in the building, the entrance that I will go into versus a community space. And I think there may be some opportunity as well to look for ways to bring the landscape a little bit more into the base of the building. We are at a moment right now where there is a practice of bringing, again, glass towers to the ground. And I think there's an opportunity, frankly, to create some more interesting and distinctive architecture by raising that base in some places. And again, as one of my fellow commissioners said, then when you interrupt that again helps to reinforce places of entrances. So I just encourage you to continue to refine the design with those thoughts in mind as you continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Marie. Mimi?
I'm really excited about this project, and I don't want to repeat all of the comments, but I do think that this proponent team really listened to our feedback, and I'm excited that it's, definitely benefited the project. I have two minor comments, and one is I definitely think the approach to the warmer materials is right in terms of, these warmer tones, but I'm worried that it might be a little bit too warm. And so as you're thinking about materiality, if you can go back to a view where you can see building B in the up front, and then this view in particular, I'm because the project seems, pretty far along, it's starting to get me to think about materiality, and I'm wondering, is that metal? Is that champagne on, the panels that are rendered as 3 stories? Is that a precast? And I do think that the material choices, whatever the material is, precast or metal, really will influence the color. And it's leaning on the warmer side. And while I think that's the right approach, it might just having you think about how warm is too warm might be a good thing to calibrate as you move forward. I do think that the color of the base with a little bit of that gray tone is pretty successful. But then thinking about, the frames coming down, it's interesting because you have choices of where the frames come down and where they actually rise up above. And if we look at the diagram that you shared with us early on about building B, and it's on I think it's like slide 3 or 4.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Keep going.
Yes. This one?
No, it's the rear view. This
Oh,
view.
yeah.
This is
Yeah.
an interesting one to me because on the far right, you've made a choice for one of the frames to come down and one to sit on the podium. And then on the front side of the building, both the frames come down. And I think on building A, you haven't quite decided what's happening at the entry. And so I think that's something to further look at. And if you can go back to the original close-up view of the entries, it feels like the frames aren't quite coming down. Oh, you were just on it.
Oh, yeah, this one. Yep.
Yeah, the frame's not quite coming down. The podium's not resting on it. And so there's some still, I think, architectural exploration that could happen there. But it is better than that curved condition that you had a couple of meetings ago. So I think this is all moving in the right direction.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Mimi. Mick Young?
Great, thanks. I agree with what my fellow landscape commissioners have talked about. I have not seen this since I think it was brought to full commission the first time around. I'm wondering if we could go back to the slide, which is from the community park side. And I just want to bring up a more materiality question, just to build on some of the comments that have been made. So if we could go a little bit further to one of the perspective views.
The eye levels.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Mhm.
So I do appreciate, actually the previous one would be great.
Mhm.
So I do appreciate like the evolution. I think that it's really gotten simpler. And I know Shauna said this earlier. As you move forward, this is like a design development comment, but as you move forward, as the landscape team moves forward with at Arcadis, I think there really could be more simplification. There's a way in which I'm assuming there's a parking garage below this. Is that correct?
There are individual garages below both buildings, but the
Okay. So that's why you have all these planter walls around all the plantings. Is that right?
the park will be at on terra firma, so
It's on
not
terra
above the
firma.
It's
garage.
on terra firma.
Yeah.
So that would be my question is, does every planter need to have a planter wall that circumvents it? I feel like maybe there might be some corners that might be more welcoming where it could be a low curb, and you're doing that in some places. There are a couple of times when you talked about evolution of the building and how the building got warmer. And I know Mimi talked about how warm is too warm. And I just wonder if can be a greater dialogue. I like that the landscape has an organic quality to it and that it does contrast with the rectilinearity of the building. But I just wonder, like right now, I'm not sure what the materiality of the benches are, but they are cool and they're white. And just wondering if there could be more of a dialogue and materiality and detailing of these benches. Right now, they're all very similar. They all create, it's hard for me to tell. Some of them look like they're taller than 18 inches, some of them are not. And just wondering if like some of them, like I liked how you had, as far as I could tell, like a performance deck that looks out onto the lawn. Do some of these planters like rise up and have like a double seat around that lawn area? And so that there's a little bit of variation from the planters. I think the plan looks really nice, but I think there could be a second level of refinement and simplification. So you have this detail of this kind of warm gray tone curb that sort of stops. And then sometimes if we go back to the previous perspective, the bench sort of has a very different figure and doesn't really relate to that curb. So I think it's just a matter of refining this detail and looking at it. But I would explore ways that maybe the bench piece is not solid. It's just a question. Maybe it does, because the buildings all have this kind of scaffolding quality to it, very delicate. Do the benches also sit on top of something that's solid? Maybe I'm trying to articulate, you have two solid things sort of meeting each other, which is the curb and the white kind of larger bench. And does one sort of contrast the other or something like that? And then the bench top meets the building. But I'd say overall, I'd also want to make sure that those trees that you have there will survive. I think some of them are going to be above the garage, and so it would be good just to know, for building on what Kirk said, that we're giving something back to the community, and you've removed that kind of shade trellis, which I felt a little sad to lose, but if you can compensate for that with enough shade trees, I think that would be fine. But appreciate it's clear you guys did a lot of work, so appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback. And just so you know, it is on terra firma through there. And so that's
Oh,
why
it is.
that's
Okay.
why the larger caliper trees are in the middle to make sure we don't
Excellent.
get the pinch.
That
So,
looks
but
great.
and I love the idea of terrace seating and some variety in that while still keeping the language. So that very thoughtful. Thank you.
Yeah, the last comment I had was I like the idea of these sculptural lights. Am I getting that right? I think from the
Yes.
plan.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, instead of a big cluster that might act as an impediment, could it actually be a linear gesture that connects the two sides of the park together? So just another thought.
Great. Thank you.
Great work. Thank you.
Thank you, McYoung. I see David's hand up, and then I'll add a few comments, and then we can see if we have any public comment. David.
I have just one comment, and could you go back to the ground floor plan? Yeah, thank you. It has to do with ground floor uses, and I'm going back to remembering your PDA process. And we talked at that time about where do you put active spaces and what's the future of Morrissey Boulevard? Because Morrissey Boulevard's not a very nice street today. I mean, it's confused. It's in my mind, it's very confused. There's traffic in the middle, and then there's these islands, and then there's more traffic, and then there's green space. And your master plan created created the idea of this kind of greenway that starts here between A and B, goes to the green space, and then goes through a couple of commercial buildings and finds its way through, I think there's a grocery store there and the old television station there, and finally finds its way to JFK MBTA station. And if you think about I think this part of the city over, I don't know, the next 10 or 20 years is going to change so dramatically with Dorchester Bay City and the Santander site and whatever might come out of expansion at UMass Boston. And the opportunities here are enormous. And so I wonder, and I don't have the answer, I just ask you to think more about it. I look at retail slash active on Morrissey and think that's a really hard space to think about how it would be used as retail active space. And then I see loading and parking and wonder if there's not a better way to lay that out, that it's a little bit tighter and the retail space that you're suggesting there could better accommodate retail. And that corner could be an invitation from Morrissey Boulevard, from an improved brand new Morrissey Boulevard that's gone on a diet, that's gotten more walkable into this greenway that's going to run all the way from South Line to JFK and then on to Dorchester Bay City, and over time both sides of the greenway or the street, that street to the north, I don't know if it has a name, but that street to the north that goes off the page at the top has more active uses, and some of that spills out from the transverse streets onto Morrissey Boulevard and makes the connection across Morrissey over to the Santander site and then over to Dorchester Bay City. I know I'm looking way into the future, and it takes a lot. It's going to take a lot more development and people and walkability for all that to happen. But if we put loading docks and I don't know if that's a parking ramp, I think it is, then we put things in the way that will never change. And so that I would just ask you to think about what the ground floors, the edges, the invitation. Kirk was a little bit talking about this, the invitation from Morrissey Boulevard into the community open space. The retail can be that invitation. Don't put things in the way. I know that's going to be unbelievably hard space to lease in the next, when these buildings get built. At least I hope they get built soon. But think into the future. Maybe it's 10 or 20 years, but when all of this has evolved, you have space. You haven't put building infrastructure in the way of what could be really valuable retail, restaurant, community spaces that lead you into the greenway and lead you down the street, and you've contributed more to everything that's around you. Thank you. I want to add, I remember this from its first presentation, and the architecture has come a long way. I won't repeat what everybody said, but really great progress.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. I had two comments to add to the really great conversation today, and I'll start actually with this slide. So one of the things we haven't talked a lot about in the two subcommittees or the full meetings is how close kind of that building A is to the South Line building. And we haven't looked at a lot of perspectives. There's one that we saw from 93 and looked like there was maybe a little billboard fuzzed out, and we looked at A, but I just wanted to encourage you as you're thinking about how tight that is, to kind of consider that relationship, even if it's not going to be, for years and years in the future. But I think that is a really tight relationship. Do you know what is the dimension there?
We're 10 feet from the property line, and then it's another 2 to 3 feet to the face of South Line.
Okay, yeah, so pretty tight. So just something to keep in mind for that at least interim relationship. And then the other comment that I had, if we can do a progression, slide 7, 8, and then 15.
So there's 7.
That's great. We'll stick here for a second. So I really appreciate you thinking about whether that bevel and the chamfer makes sense and really making a clear entry there. I think this is a huge improvement, and I was really happy to see it. The piece that still troubles me is what I'm going to call that podium shoulder or the barnacle. Yes. I don't know that is helping the building expression, and whether the frame could just come down there and then you could have the inflection kind of further toward 93, for me, would clarify the entry and also give a little bit more of a setback from the street and from the sidewalk. Could we go to slide 8 now? So this helped me just to kind of think about it. So if those two blue forms, yes, actually came down and allowed your entry blue form to come down on the park, yes, so that frame, Mimi was talking a little bit about this earlier. For me, that would be a stronger expression, would really would help again, the legibility of the building. And I'd love to have the team at least test that. And then slide 15. Oh, go ahead. And
yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify. So you're saying this.
Right.
So you'd have a little bit of an inset here.
Right.
This
and
would come down.
The barnacle kind of comes out.
Yep. So it's returning. And then returning there again.
Well, that the barnacle would actually come out completely.
Go away.
The shoulder or the barnacle or whatever we want to call it, right?
So the entire tower would come to grade.
That's right. Just one thing I'd love to have you test. And then to slide 15, still in this theme, I just wanted to compliment you. And I thought this rendering showed it the best. Just having that multi-story expression of the entry also was such a huge improvement. And I actually like the idea here that it gets quite light. And then I think that frame could come down to the ground still, but that it gets quite light above that entry. For me, that would be an immediate visual cue that's how you get in the building. And I liked Mick Young's comment too about, maybe the vertical light elements, pull you through the park. But I really appreciate all the changes you've made. And like Mimi said, I'm really excited to see this project built.
Thank you.
So I think that concludes the commissioner comments. Christina, can we take some public comments?
At this time, we'd like to invite any members of the public in attendance who may wish to contribute public testimony to raise your digital hand, and I'll call on you. If you're calling in by phone, press star 9 on your dial pad to activate the raise hand function and star 6 to mute and unmute yourself. Please state your name and any relevant project affiliation information, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes. Commissioners, I see no hands raised, so we'll close the public comment period.
Thank you, Christina. I think we have a couple of firsts tonight. No public comment, and also that we will be closing the meeting while there is still daylight. So, all right. Commissioners, it's time for us to make a motion. Would someone like to take a first pass at that?
I'll make a motion. I believe that this project has made quite a bit of advancement. There have been a number of good comments regarding the podium in various forms on both the Southeast Expressway side as well as the Morrissey side. And I would recommend that we allow the project to be approved, but with the caveat of additional staff development on the topics in the landscape, the podium, and other architectural treatments that have been put forth by the commissioners.
Thank you, Kirk. Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. All those in favor, please say aye. Jonathan Garland?
Sorry.
Abstain.
Shauna Gilly-Smith?
Aye.
Mik-Young Kim,
Aye.
Mimi Love,
Aye.
Anne Marie Lubenow,
Aye.
David Manfredi,
Aye.
Laura Solano,
Aye.
Kirk, we got your aye already, and myself, Linda Eastley, aye. Thank you so much. Look forward to having you continue to work with the planning department on this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners, it's time to adjourn the meeting. Christina, did we have any other new business to talk about tonight?
We do not.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So
Moved.
moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Jonathan Garland,
Aye.
Shauna Gilly-Smith,
Aye.
Mik-Young Kim,
Aye.
Mimi Love,
Aye.
Anne Marie Lubenow,
Aye.
David Manfredi.
Aye.
Do we have David Nagahiro back?
Aye.
Thank you. Laura Solano,
Aye.
Kirk Sykes,
Aye.
and myself, Linda Eastley, aye. We are adjourned. Have a great 4th of July, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Aye.
Thanks,
Good,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.